Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. The Philadelphia Eagles are traveling down to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a little bit of a revenge match from the NFC wildcard game that the Eagles didn't really bother showing up for, the final nail in the coffin of last season. But earlier in the 2023 season, they played a really dominant game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And certainly Eagles fans are hopeful that the Eagles team that's going to be going down to Raymond James Stadium this week is a better team than the team that faced off against the Buccaneers in the wild card round. Now, at the time of this recording, Hurricane Helene is hitting the Florida area, so certainly we hope that everybody is okay, that everybody is staying safe, and that everybody that is heavily impacted by the hurricane is going to get back up on their feet. So we're going to be talking about this game and some of the biggest question marks that I see the Eagles potentially running into as they get ready for this game. And by far and away, the biggest question mark is going to be the Eagles' wide receiver core. As we know, prior to the Week 2 matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, A.J. Brown was ruled out due to a hamstring injury. The Eagles obviously lost the Falcons game. Then in Week 3, Devontae Smith had to leave the game due to a concussion. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown have not practiced in either the Wednesday or the Thursday practice leading up to the Week 4 matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So this does not bode well for their participation in the game. Add into this the fact that Britton Covey sustained a shoulder injury during his Week 3 appearance against the Saints and is projected to miss about 6 to 8 weeks. He is on injured reserve. The Philadelphia Eagles receiver core is looking pretty banged up. It's looking pretty thin. We've got the likes of Jahan Dotson, Paris Campbell, Johnny Wilson as our leading receivers going into this game. So the biggest question mark and the biggest key to this game really is, how are the wide receivers going to do? And that involves a lot of things, right? So it involves the actual performance of the wide receivers. Are they able to break away from their coverages? Are they able to get open? What does Jalen Hurts' connection with those guys look like? Because that's going to be important over the course of this game. Now, none of those guys are intrinsically bad. We just haven't seen a whole lot from them. Jahan Dotson is the one that we've seen the most of. In the Week 3 matchup against the Saints, he had 2 catches on 3 targets for a combined 8 yards, which, not looking so great. Paris Campbell, 2 catches on 2 targets for 13 yards, and then Johnny Wilson, 1 catch on 2 targets for 9 yards. So we haven't seen those guys really a lot, and it's going to be important for them to step up. Now, Jalen Hurts will still have Dallas Goedert available. Dallas Goedert last week against the Saints, 10 catches on 11 targets for 170 yards, including the 61-yard reception that set up the go-ahead touchdown for the Eagles. But while Dallas Goedert certainly is an exceptional tight end, we can't rely exclusively on Dallas Goedert. That's what got us into trouble last year. So the Eagles are going to have to rely on the wide receivers to step up and be the next person and be able to deliver. Now, before we get too far away from the injuries, I do want to touch base on the other injuries that the Eagles are dealing with, the most notable of which is Lane Johnson, who did not participate in practice on either Wednesday or Thursday due to a concussion. Lane Johnson has been a difference maker for the Eagles on the offensive line. Certainly he's one of the most seasoned members now that Jason Kelce is gone, but he is also just a rock on the offensive line in general. And the Eagles have benefited from him and his performance. When the Eagles play with Lane Johnson on the offensive line, the Eagles are 91-54-1 since Lane Johnson joined the team. When the Eagles have had to play without Lane Johnson, they are 14-22. So with Lane Johnson not participating Wednesday or Thursday, definitely raises concern given the Eagles' past history when they've had to play without Lane. That's the bad news. The good news is that even though Lane Johnson has been officially listed as did not participate, Lane has been seen in the facility, stretching, doing some of the warm-ups, maybe not necessarily with the team, but on the sidelines. This has been reported by multiple Eagles beat writers, and it is an indication that Lane Johnson could be trending towards participating. He's farther along in the concussion protocol than somebody like Devontae Smith is, who has not been seen doing those things over the course of this week. So, this is a big, big development, and we'll see how things pan out when the Eagles release the injury report and release the statuses over the course of the next couple of days. There were a few other injuries as well. Mekhi Becton dealing with a finger injury, Landon Dickerson dealing with a wrist injury, and Darius Slay dealing with a knee injury. All of those guys were full participants by Thursday's practice. The only other person who lit up on the Eagles injury report is Milton Williams, who was not on the injury report on Wednesday, but was listed as limited on Thursday due to a groin injury. I'm not expecting a ton of problems from any of those guys, but we'll see how all that pans out. Very well could be that all these guys will be in on Sunday and it'll be a non-issue. All of this brings me to the next key to the game here, which is going to be, very simply put, having an effective run game. Now, we're going to need to rely on the run game much more, given the absence of our top two wide receivers. That's just a fact. The Eagles have a stellar running back in Saquon Barkley, and they don't have as much depth as they would probably have liked in the receiver core. And certainly with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith likely being out for this game, the Eagles are going to have to make a few changes and be able to run the football even more so than they have been. And to their credit, when the Eagles have run the football over the course of this season so far, they've been very effective. The Eagles are number 3 in the league in terms of rushing yards per game at 167.3. They are number 6 in the league over the course of these last 3 games in terms of rushing yards per play, which is 5.02. So those are some really good numbers, and the Eagles have the ability to run the football. Certainly, again, on the legs of Saquon Barkley, but also with Kenny Gainwell, Jalen Hurts mixed in there a little bit. You have those options. Add into that the Tampa Bay run defense is one of the few run defenses that you could probably say is worse than the Eagles, and we do have an opportunity there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have given up, on average, 137.7 rushing yards per game. That's 25th in the league. And 4.86 yards per carry. That's 26th in the league. For context, the Eagles' defense has given up 134.7 rushing yards per game on average. It's about 24th in the league. And then 5.18 yards per carry. That's 30th in the league. Now, Nick Sirianni was asked earlier this week about Saquon and the things that he has seen out of him over the course of the last several months, and had this to say about it.
Man, yeah, I mean, there's so many different things when you see a cut in person. When he's on your team, for whatever reason, when he's on your team, it just, I don't know. I can tell you how many times I've just really shook my head man, that was an unbelievable cut. And it's like he's making these cuts at 230 pounds. Oh, on top of that, he's making these cuts at 4.3 speed like that. And these guys, who's like him?
The next key to the game, sticking with the offense here, is going to be the offense's ability to respond to the blitz, which was coming hot and heavy in the wild card game at the end of last season. Jalen Hurts in the wildcard game was sacked 3 times and sustained 6 quarterback hits. And the Buccaneers were just simply getting a lot of pressure to the Eagles' offensive backfield. It was not a great scene, and the Eagles really needed to rise to the challenge when it came to the blitz because a lot of that simply wasn't working for really anybody involved. Now, Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore was asked about that and had this to say.
Yeah, it's always one of the biggest challenges each and every week in the NFL is these pressure plans are really really challenging, really hard, and then you put the players on top of it, and it can be a challenge. And so we're constantly trying to make the adjustments each and every week. Each week you're going to use different tools in your toolbox. I think our guys have done a really nice job the first few weeks as far as by no means perfect, but utilizing different tools, handling those different things, and we'll continue to evolve. Obviously, this one will be a really big challenge. Todd is one of the best in this league at bringing pressures, stressing your protections, trying to break your rules, and so it's going to be a fun week for us to try and sort this out.
And Nick Sirianni added on to that point later in the week.
We've worked really hard at this, obviously, for the past year, and we've done a good job so far. But you're only as good as your next game. So excited about the challenge. I know Jalen's really played well against the blitz these last couple games, and he's worked his butt off on it. And just excited about the challenge, but we know there's going to be challenges against Todd Bowles' coach defense. So, again, we've done a nice job so far, but you're only as good as your next game.
Ultimately making sure that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are not able to repeat what was successful in the wild card round. That's going to be really important for this offense to stay on track. The next key to this game is going to be creating more turnovers. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles are 25th in the league in terms of defensive takeaways. They've had 2, both of them coming off of interceptions. In the league right now, their turnover differential, which is the number of times the Eagles' defense has taken it away versus the number of times the offense has given the ball away, is -4, which in the league is 30th in the league out of 32. It's actually tied for 30th with the Las Vegas Raiders. So the Eagles' defense is going to have to step up, and the Eagles' defense is going to have to try to force more turnovers, try to force the Buccaneers to give the ball up, because it hasn't happened really a lot over the course of the first couple weeks here, and it's going to be really important as the Eagles start to face more significant teams later on down the road, certainly. Now, that also comes with limiting turnovers on the offensive side of the football. So, limiting the turnovers on offense and then relying on more players to get turnovers beyond Reed Blankenship, who has both of the Eagles' interceptions over the course of the season, that's going to be big. But I think that the Eagles simply have to improve in the turnover game. The last key to this game is going to be decision making, and I'm going to preface this by saying that we're always looking at decision making through a 2020 lens. We're looking back at it. Hindsight is always 2020. We know how things panned out. We know we could have done something differently. We should have done something differently. At the same time, there can't be this aversion to kicking field goals when we're midway through the opponent's territory, but not in the red zone yet. Even when we are in the red zone, if we're in that shallow red zone area from 10 to 20 yards out, on 4th down, take the points at a certain point here. Now, Nick Sirianni was asked multiple times this week regarding the play calling process. Notably, he was asked regarding how it works and the relationship with Kellen Moore and how all of that pans together. He had this to say about it.
Yeah, I'm still in there, and still, I think, in the past, it's been kind of going through the game plan and saying, hey, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and then in these scenarios, sitting in there listening a little bit more, not running the ship as far as like, hey, I'm driving. We're gonna talk about this. I'll lead the direction of the conversation. It's more now. I'm sitting passenger seat, listening to the conversation, adding my information. Again, I'm not going to be shy to say, hey, here's what I think in this scenario, or here's what I think in that scenario. But it is more, I'm letting Kellen run drive the car. And just like my wife will say, to me, hey, make sure you take a right here or left here. She's giving me directions. I'm going to, same thing in these scenarios.
But that doesn't explain the overcorrections that seem to be occurring. Kevin Kincaid, one of our friends over at Crossing Broad, made a post that indicated that Nick Sirianni is like a fishtailing car, where there's so much overcorrection that he winds up in the ditch anyway. That sentiment was echoed by friend of the show Shane Haff, who said pretty bluntly that Nick Sirianni doesn't go for it on 4th and 1 there if he doesn't catch so much flack for kicking a field goal at the end of the Falcons game. We hear so much coach speak over the course of the week that sometimes we get desensitized to the fact that coach speak has a lot of, it was my fault, I've got to do a better job of leading this team. That's fine. And it's an important part of Nick Sirianni's core values, particularly surrounding accountability. But accountability is more than just taking ownership. Yep, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I've got to do a better job in this situation. I get it. We all get that part. Taking ownership is the first step in accountability. But it's not the end-all, be-all of accountability. Accountability goes farther than that, and it involves you learning from your mistake. It involves you growing from your mistake. And I need to see more of that. And I need to see it in a way that's not hyper-corrective or over-corrective. I need to see it in a way that's responsible and is going to inspire the team to also try to grow from their own mistakes in a way that is responsible. Those are my keys to the game, but let me know what you think in the comments below. What are you going to be looking for as the Eagles travel down to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers? Let me know. And thank you so much to everybody for tuning in to the Bird's Nest Podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest Podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, as well as by sharing to your social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and the Odyssey app. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles and NFL coverage. And if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Eagles!